Mayfield traded to the Carolina Panthers. A not so shocking, but like big, huge offseason trade in the sense of like the timing and the ramifications. And joining me to break it down, the one, the only Jared Dubin. Dubs, what's up, buddy?
I'm doing fine. How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. Moving is the worst thing in the entire world.
Can confirm.
And don't really want to ever do it again. And I got waiting on anyway. Yeah, like I bet moving is a lot easier for Baker Mayfield. Like I bet Baker's happy about moving now.
He's probably moving a further distance, but he's also probably got, he can ship everything and doesn't have to.
I mean, if you're like, he's actually going to be taking a pay cut, and we'll get to all of that and the ramifications of that. But he took a slight pay cut for this season. The move means that he's got enough money though where he can just pay people to move all of his stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
he doesn't have to think. Yeah,
he's taking a pay cut. I thought that they were splitting the money between the Browns and Panthers.
Baker actually took a $3.5 million pay cut as part of the deal, but according to Mike Garafolo of NFL Network, he's going to be able to earn it back in incentives. So presumably, like if the Panthers get to the playoffs, and Baker's a Pro Bowler, then Baker's going to get $3.5 million. That would be my guess. I doubt it's like a Super Bowl appearance incentive. That would be kind of insane.
Anyway. I mean, I guess if you want to get traded, then giving away $3.5 million potentially might be worth it. I would have a very hard time giving away $3.5 million, but I also don't already have 3 or 4 years worth of number one pick salary. So
there we go. Now my ears are gone, but I'm no longer in like a closet. I'm at Carter Finley Stadium. Wow, the magic of technology, everybody.
Wait, what stadium? Oh, it's NC State.
Yeah, the greatest stadium in the history of the world, dude.
Sure.
Some people say that PNC Arena is really just the Madison Square Garden of the South.
Some people being you on Twitter.
Nobody says that. It's not a thing anybody says. Anyway, so the Baker Mayfield trade, I believe it was just simply a 5th round pick, right? I mean, this is not the Browns had to trade Baker. There was really only 2 suitors. Maybe you could make the case that somebody else could bring him in as a backup and try to the Bucks could get him and think Tom Brady might move on after this year. But by and large, it was like the Panthers and the Seahawks. Mm-hmm. And it didn't seem like the Seahawks had a whole lot of interest. So it came down to, did the Panthers want to pay for a significant chunk of Baker Mayfield's salary? And were the Browns willing to eat enough of the salary? I find the timing of it a little interesting in the sense that if I was Cleveland, and we talked about this last week on the pod, but if I'm Cleveland, I'm probably more inclined to have pushed back this decision even further while waiting to find out what the deal with Deshaun Watson is and seeing if there was some way to repair the relationship with Baker, and knowing that you just gave Carolina a massive your opponent in week 1, you just gave them a massive upgrade at quarterback over Sam Darnold and Matt Corral.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much the week 1 thing matters to me from the Browns' perspective. It's only one of their 17 games, and it's not like they're going to see the Panthers a whole lot of times over the course of, Deshaun Watson's contract, or even however much longer Baker plays in Carolina, if it's beyond this year. I would imagine they just set a certain price, and this was when they happened to get it, and that's why they made the move now as opposed to waiting. To me, the benefit of waiting would have been if somebody else's starter gets hurt during training camp, as opposed to like, we're going to bring Baker back. I don't really see how that would have been tenable for them, especially since he was basically like, I'm not doing that. Like, is it worth trying to mend the relationship to have him start however many games Deshaun gets suspended for? From their perspective, I think I would rather have the pick. I'm curious if the conditional 5th means it's a 5th that can get better, or it's something that can turn into a 5th based on the conditions. But I think from the Panthers' perspective, it's way more interesting. They now have given up a 2nd, 4th, and 6th round pick to get Sam Darnold, a 3rd and a 4th to move up to get Matt Corral, and now a 5th to get Baker Mayfield. And I would say, like, are you even sold on their quarterback situation at this point, that it's going to be like even average quarterback play? Like, they're still looking at bottom 10 quarterback play probably. And to have spent all that much draft capital is pretty wild to get basically not that much in return for that.
Yeah. All right. So on that let's talk about that aspect, because I think that's really important about this. Baker is, I think 2 things can be true. One, Baker can be easily the best quarterback in the Panthers quarterback room. And I think that is absolutely the case. Two, Baker can easily be an upgrade. And obviously, if he's the best quarterback, he's an upgrade. And I think he's a significant upgrade. And I said this, I've been saying this all basically offseason, is like Matt Rule at some point was going to have to say, hey, look, Teps or whatever, Dave, Big Papa Brass. I mean, like whatever he calls him, Matt Rule is going to come to the season and probably still will, like minus 200 to be the first coach fired. Like he is very clearly the most likely coach to be fired, I think, in the entire NFL. And if you don't go out and get Baker, who presented the last possible decent upgrade over Sam Darnold and Matt Corral, one of whom, has struggled his entire career and wasn't great last season, aside from some decent performances early on against the Jets, Giants, and Texans when they started 3-0 and when Christian McCaffrey was there. You're basically sealing your own fate. And so, like, I understand why they went and got Baker Mayfield. However, I agree completely with you, and I got ripped to shreds. It's like the Pick Six podcast most watched YouTube video of all time is when I went on this rant about the Panthers trading up to get Matt Corral. And it's not because I don't like Matt Corral. It's because exactly what you just said. You gave up a ton of high-level draft capital for Sam Darnold and Matt Corral. People are like, oh, it's just a third-round pick. No, it's not just a third-round pick. Like, this is how you build teams. You have to have, eventually you're going to have to get superstars. And you see it on the screen right now. It's like DJ Moore, 3 years, $61.9 million extension. They're going to have to pay Brian Burns at some point. Derek Brown will be due for a contract extension. Other players in the secondary as well. Christian McCaffrey eats up a ton of cap space. I know Ike Ekwonu is a rookie, but 3 years in, if he's playing the way you expect him to, he's going to get a massive contract. And so, in the NFL, if you are correctly building a team, you are going to be bringing in superstars, and then you have to be supplementing it with good picks in the mid rounds. And the Panthers just can't make any picks the last couple of years because they've given them all away for these quarterbacks who just aren't even that good. And it'd be one thing if they were taking flyers on, you give up like the Rams give up 2 firsts for Matthew Stafford. Like there's an established performance level from this guy over the course of his career. That's one thing. But I don't mind taking a flyer on the Baker trade itself for the 5th. I'm fine with. It's the Darnold with the Corral trades. It's coupled with all three. It's you just gave up a bunch of what amounts to. I bet if you add up all the picks they use on these quarterbacks, I bet it amounts to something close to a first-round pick in terms of draft capital.
Yeah, the Baker trade in a vacuum is perfectly fine. They gave up a 5th-round pick for a 1-year flyer on a guy who has at least shown the ability to be a competent NFL starter, and even better than that when everything is working in his favor in Cleveland, when he's had really good offensive line play and the run game going and the play action all married together. He's played at a decently high level when that's happened. It's basically when anything is off, where if one offensive lineman was hurt, or the one wide receiver was out, or the run game wasn't working perfectly, then things have kind of fallen apart for him. But a 5th-round pick for that is perfectly fine. That's a reasonable price to pay. It's having also thrown 5 more draft picks at 2 other options who are, in an ideal world now, not going to play for you. And it's one thing if you're, giving up draft capital.
Bless you.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that.
Right.
It's one thing if you're giving up draft capital and actually getting your starter with that draft capital. But they went, from the number 6 pick until the 4th round this year before they made a draft pick. They just had nothing on day 2.
The 3rd round, because they traded up into the 3rd round to get back to Corral, right? Yeah,
they were supposed to go until the 4th round, but they moved up by giving up, I think, this year's or
next year's this year's 4th, which is 101, and then next year's 3rd, which again, is people are oh, that's not much. It's no, that's actually a lot. You were, and then when you factor in the Darnold stuff, exactly, and you see on the screen it's really interesting because the Panthers' win total was 6, juiced to the under -120 at Caesars, and now you go from 5.6 projected wins according to Sportsline with Darnold to 6.3 for Mayfield. The chance to division, you double your division chances up to 2.5%. And I mean, if Tom Brady plays 17 games, you're just not winning the division in Carolina. Neither is Atlanta or New Orleans.
Doubling your playoff odds is pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was looking at too. Is you go from 4.4% to 8.8%. I mean, it's not even like you're not even in. You're telling me there's a chance territory. You're in like, hey, I mean, 10% chance to make the playoffs for like. I mean, Matt Rule would probably sign for that right now, like 1 in 10 chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah,
And,
you've gone
and
from like 1 in 25 to 1 in 11 ish.
yeah, exactly. Like that's a significant upgrade.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
I mean,
for a relatively low cost, like the money on the cap sheet is not insignificant, but
it's
that's
1
a
year.
lot less than you're paying for most starting quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I mean, like now you do have to factor that you're also paying Sam Darnold $18 million, and Matt Corral's on a rookie deal, so he's pretty cheap. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I think when you add up Baker's deal with look, the construction of this quarterback room has been poorly done, but this is probably the best possible outcome the Panthers could have ended up with coming into this all season. Like that's both things can be true.
They could have been a Russell Wilson team, I guess, would be the better option. I don't know how they would have gotten there. Like, I don't know how they were beating both Denver's offer of picks and Denver's offer of where Wilson would have wanted to go. I guess, would you rather have Baker than Jimmy G? He's healthier.
Yeah, I feel like you get a motivated Baker in the final with playing for a contract, who's been just cast aside by the team that took him number 1 overall versus
Jimmy makes more money too. Would have been more difficult to fit that on the books.
And I think it's very obvious that, or at least the 49ers are trying to make it obvious that they want more for Jimmy. Whether or not they can get it, we'll see. But
I think they could probably get more than a conditional 5th if they're willing to eat some of the money. But how much more? I don't know.
And the other thing with Jimmy too is, and like, that's a good comp, is like you weren't going to be able to trade for Jimmy until probably close to training camp because of his shoulder issue. And if that's the case, then and you're really in a that's just you're running a risk there where you give up let's say you give up a 3rd round pick or a 4th round pick, which you don't really have.
Which they don't have anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and then Jimmy comes in, like, you don't know if he's healthy. He's got to pass a physical. He's got to learn the offense. And like now Baker can be in with the Panthers for the entirety of their offseason, which I think is a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, OTAs and minicamp are gone, but, coming into training camp, presumably as a starter.
Yeah.
And, he's got a couple weeks to get himself situated there before camp starts too. Like, having it done now is probably something of a comfort.
Significantly preferable to the Panthers to getting it done like in the 3rd week of the preseason.
Right. Like, who was it that got traded? And like, was it Sam Bradford to the Vikings? Was it like
yes, because Teddy Bridgewater got hurt in training camp because it wasn't a preseason game because it wasn't televised. It was training camp. It was like a
practice. Yeah,
it was just practice. Yeah, and I think was it Bradford was traded the next day, maybe.
I don't remember the exact timing, but it was during camp as opposed to
now. It was quick when it happened. Because remember, Carson Wentz was going to Bradford was going to start. Wentz was going to ride the bench, and then they were like, "All right, we can get a first for Sam Bradford, and we think that Wentz is good enough to play right away." And he came in. And he was like, anyway, he was okay. We don't need to rehash Carson Wentz, but yeah, that's sort of the example of.
Look at all the draft capital involved with all these quarterbacks we're talking about right now.
It's crazy, dude. Like, I mean,
think about how much draft capital has been traded for Wentz 3 times now.
It's wild. Why do people keep doing it? I don't get it. But to your point, like if the Browns played chicken like that with Baker, they could have gotten a team in training camp who deals with that injury, and maybe they get a little bit more for him. But then you have this unhappy Baker situation. You want to get the money off the cap if you can. You do want to get something in return for him, and
you can't excuse the fines for camp anymore, right? So it wouldn't have been like you can just tell him don't come to camp because then he's giving up money.
Right. Yeah.